I canceled my own plans, sacrificed my savings, and poured my heart into raising my daughter's children for 15 years, only to be treated like hired help they didn't even have to pay. But the day they saw me at the airport, boarding a first-class flight to Paris, their faces turned whiter than the clouds we'd be flying through. They had no idea that while I was changing diapers and packing lunches, I was also quietly building a fortune they'd never see a penny of. Before we jump back, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I never planned to spend my golden years as an unpaid nanny. At 58, when most of my friends were traveling or taking up new hobbies, I was learning to change diapers again. I remember standing in the baby aisle at the supermarket, staring bewildered at the wall of formula options, wondering how I'd found myself here instead of on that painting retreat in Santa Fe I'd dreamed of for decades. My name is Eleanor Winters. I taught third grade at Oakwood Elementary in Providence, Rhode Island for 42 years. I loved every minute of it, the wide-eyed curiosity of 8-year-olds, the satisfaction of watching them master new skills, the handmade cards they'd give me at the end of each year. I'd carefully saved those cards in albums, planning to flip through them during my retirement, a tangible reminder of a life well spent nurturing young minds. My husband Stanley and I had planned it all so carefully. We'd live modestly, save diligently, and then enjoy our golden years together. He would finally have time for his woodworking. I would finally pick up the paintbrushes I'd set aside when our own children came along. We'd travel, nothing extravagant. Just the national parks we'd always wanted to see. Maybe a river cruise in Europe if we could swing it. But life rarely follows the plans we make. Stanley's heart attack came 3 days after my retirement party. It was quick, the doctor said. He felt little pain. A small mercy that did nothing to fill the gaping hole his absence left in my life. The house we'd shared for 35 years suddenly felt cavernous, every empty corner an echo of his missing presence. Our modest colonial-style home in Providence had 3 bedrooms, one for us, one for each of our children, Melissa and David. Both had left the nest long ago. Melissa to pursue her law degree at Boston University, David to join the Coast Guard before settling in California. After Stanley passed, I'd call David once a week, our conversations warm but brief. He had his own family now, twin boys who barely knew me except as the grandmother who sent birthday checks and Christmas packages. Melissa had always been more present, visiting every other month with her husband Craig, an ambitious management consultant whose career seemed to consume every waking moment of their lives. They'd married late, focused on building their careers first. I remembered the tense conversations when they'd visit. Melissa was already 35, her biological clock ticking louder each year. Craig wanted to wait until he made partner. I never intervened. It wasn't my place. So when Melissa called me that rainy April evening, sobbing with a mixture of joy and panic, I was caught off guard. "Mom, we're pregnant, with twins." The doctor confirmed it today. I clutched the phone tighter, tears welling up. "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful news." "I'm terrified, Mom. Craig just got that promotion we've been waiting for, the one that means relocating to Boston. It's everything we've worked for, but the timing. How are we going to manage twins and these new responsibilities?" I listened, as she poured out her anxieties. The 60-hour work weeks both she and Craig faced, the astronomical cost of childcare in Boston, the waiting lists for quality daycares that stretched well past a year. Neither of them wanted to step back from their careers, not after working so hard to build them. I had just put my house on the market. Stanley's medical bills, despite our insurance, had eaten into our savings more than I liked to admit. The plan was to sell, pay off the remaining mortgage, and buy a modest condo in Sedona, Arizona, near my sister Charlotte. She'd been urging me to move closer ever since Stanley's funeral. "The air is clearer here, Ellie," she'd told me. "The sunsets will inspire those paintings you've always wanted to create. and I could use the company. I'd even signed up for a 3-month art workshop in Santa Fe, paid the non-refundable deposit, and started packing up 40 years' worth of memories, deciding what to keep and what to let go. But hearing the desperation in my daughter's voice that evening, I felt a familiar tug, that maternal instinct that never quite switches off, no matter how old your children grow. What if I came to help out? The words left my mouth before I'd fully processed the implications. Just until you get settled and find suitable childcare. The relief in Melissa's voice was palpable. Mom, would you really? It would just be temporary. I promise. 6 months, maybe a year tops until we get on the waiting list for that good daycare program Craig's colleague recommended. Of course, sweetheart. Family comes first. I hung up the phone and glanced around my half-packed living room. Cardboard boxes labeled in black marker. Kitchen, books, Stanley's things. I picked up the framed photo of Stanley and me on our 30th anniversary trip to Niagara Falls, his arm wrapped protectively around my shoulders, his salt and pepper beard contrasting with the bright blue of the rushing water behind us. Looks like our plans are changing again, old man, I whispered to his smiling image. But I think you'd approve. The house sold quickly. The real estate market in Providence was heating up, and I made a modest profit. I called Charlotte to break the news, that I wouldn't be joining her in Arizona after all. Oh, Ellie, she sighed, disappointment evident even over the phone. I understand, but are you sure about this? You've put your life on hold for everyone else for so long. When is it going to be your turn? It's just temporary, I insisted, repeating Melissa's words. The twins will need me, and then I'll come to Arizona. Save a spot for me in that painting class next year. Charlotte wasn't convinced. Just be careful they don't take advantage of your good nature. You've always been too generous for your own good. I brushed off her concern. These were my daughter and son-in-law, not opportunists. They needed help during a challenging transition. What kind of mother, what kind of grandmother would I be if I chose painting sunsets over helping my family when they needed me most? I arrived in Boston a week before Melissa's due date, moving into their spacious guest bedroom in their newly purchased brownstone in Beacon Hill. The room was tastefully decorated in neutral tones, with a comfortable queen bed and an antique writing desk positioned beneath a large window overlooking the tree-lined street. It was lovely, but clearly designed for temporary occupants. No closet space, no personal touches, nothing that suggested permanence. We'll clear out some closet space in the hallway for your things, Melissa promised as Craig carried in my suitcases. Sorry about the cramped quarters, but we're converting the third bedroom into a nursery for the twins. This is perfect, I assured her, though I'd just downsized from a 3-bedroom house to a single room without even a dresser to call my own. I don't need much space. The twins, Emma and Ethan, arrived 2 weeks later, healthy but smaller than expected. Melissa's maternity leave was 12 weeks, during which I helped her navigate the bewildering world of caring for 2 newborns simultaneously. Craig took a perfunctory 2 weeks off before plunging back into 60-hour work weeks, often returning home after the twins were already asleep. The first year at the Boston office is crucial, he explained, loosening his tie as he microwaved the dinner I'd saved for him. I need to establish myself, show them they made the right choice in bringing me on. I nodded, understanding, but also noting how the burden of child-rearing was already falling disproportionately on Melissa, and by extension, me. When Melissa's maternity leave ended, the true nature of my role became clear. She'd managed to negotiate a 4-day work week, but those 4 days were intense, leaving the house at 7 a.m., often not returning until after 8 p.m. The temporary arrangement we'd discussed began stretching into something that looked increasingly permanent. We're on 3 waiting lists for daycares, Melissa assured me as the twins' first birthday approached. One of them has to come through soon. But none did. And then, During what was supposed to be a celebratory dinner for the twins' first birthday, which Craig missed due to a client emergency, Melissa dropped another bombshell. "Mom, remember how we said we wanted 3 children?" she said hesitantly, picking at her cake. "Well, I'm pregnant again." I masked my surprise with a smile, hugging my daughter while my mind raced. Another baby. My temporary arrangement was about to be extended indefinitely. "That's wonderful news," I said, meaning it despite the implications for my own plans. "The twins will love having a little brother or sister." "We're hoping for a boy this time," Melissa confided. "Craig has always wanted a son to follow in his footsteps." Joey arrived 8 months later, a robust baby boy with Craig's chin and Melissa's eyes. By then, the twins were walking, talking, and entering the challenging toddler phase that required constant vigilance. My days blurred into an endless cycle of diapers, meals, naps, playtime, and cleanup, punctuated by school runs once the twins reached preschool age. "We couldn't do it without you, Mom," Craig would say, patting my shoulder as he breezed through the kitchen on his way to another late meeting. "You're saving us a fortune in childcare costs." Yet despite saving them a fortune, they never offered to pay me. Not once in all those years did either of them suggest compensating me for the work I was doing, work that would have cost them upwards of $60,000 a year for a qualified nanny to care for 3 children. My teacher's pension covered my basic needs, but there was little left for the comforts I'd worked so hard for over a lifetime of teaching. I'd given up my home, my independence, my retirement dreams, and in return, I got a guest bedroom that never quite became mine, even after a decade. The children, though, they were my joy. Emma with her precocious vocabulary and endless questions, Ethan with his gentle soul and artistic talents, Joey with his infectious laugh and boundless energy. I loved them fiercely, completely. I was there for their first steps, first words, first days of school. I bandaged scraped knees, soothed fears during thunderstorms, helped with science projects and spelling tests. In many ways, I was more parent than grandparent. Melissa and Craig were loving when present, bringing expensive gifts and planning elaborate birthday parties, but the day-to-day nurturing fell to me. I never complained. These children deserved all the love and attention I could give them, regardless of their parents' availability. Years passed this way. The twins entered elementary school, then middle school. Joey went from kindergarten to first grade, then second. My 70th birthday came and went with a hastily arranged dinner at a restaurant Craig selected, where he spent most of the evening answering emails on his phone while Melissa tried to keep the children from disturbing neighboring tables. When the twins turned 12 and Joey was 6, I gently suggested it might be time for me to find my own place. "But we need you more than ever now," Melissa protested, her brow furrowing in that way that reminded me so much of Stanley. "The kids have so many activities, and their schedules are impossible with our work hours. Emma has gymnastics 4 days a week. Ethan joined the competitive chess club, and Joey's starting travel soccer. We can't possibly manage without you." "I'm getting older, sweetheart," I reminded her gently. "I may not be able to keep up with 3 active children much longer." "Nonsense." "Mom, you're healthier than people 20 years younger," Craig interjected, barely looking up from his laptop. "Besides, where would you go? Housing prices have skyrocketed and your pension barely covers groceries these days. It makes more financial sense for you to stay with us." There it was. The assumption that my financial situation was precarious, that I couldn't possibly support myself without their charity of a guest bedroom and a place at their table. And perhaps most tellingly, not a single word about whether I might want something more from my remaining years than serving as their children's caretaker. What they didn't know, what I never told them, was that teaching wasn't my only source of income. My late husband Stanley, practical and cautious to a fault, had left me with more than just memories. During our 35 years of marriage, Stanley had worked as an electrical engineer for a small tech company called Microcom Systems. Not glamorous. Work, but steady, with decent benefits that helped put both our children through college without student loans. What no one in the family knew was that early in his career, he'd helped develop a crucial component for wireless communication systems, a type of signal amplifier that became standard in many devices. The company had been struggling back then, operating out of a converted warehouse in Providence. Instead of a cash bonus for the patent, they'd offered Stanley stock options. Probably worthless, he'd told me one night as we sat at our kitchen table, reviewing our modest finances. But you never know. If the company ever gets off the ground, maybe they'll help fund the kids' college someday. For decades, those options sat in a drawer in Stanley's desk, nearly forgotten as we focused on raising our family, paying our mortgage, and setting aside what little we could for retirement. Microcom Systems was eventually acquired by a larger tech company, which itself was later acquired by a telecommunications giant during the tech boom of the late 1990s. Stanley's modest options multiplied through splits and growth. He'd consulted a financial advisor after the second acquisition, an honest man named Martin Goldstein, who advised him to hold rather than sell. "This technology is just beginning its growth cycle," Martin had told Stanley. "If you don't need the money immediately, let it ride." Stanley never cashed out, convinced the value would keep rising. "This is your safety net," he'd told me during one of our last conversations before his heart attack. "Don't tell the kids. They'll just want to spend it on something foolish, like remodeling a kitchen that's perfectly fine, or buying a vacation home they'll use twice a year. Promise me, Ellie, this is for you, for whatever you want to do when I'm gone." I honored his wish. Even as I washed endless loads of my grandchildren's laundry, prepared their meals, helped with homework, and attended every school performance and soccer game, often alone because Melissa and Craig were too busy, I kept my growing portfolio a secret. Every month, I took a taxi to meet with Martin, telling the family I was attending a book club. Martin helped me diversify the investments, and over 15 years, my nest egg grew to a sum that would have made Stanley proud. The original Microcom stock options, along with prudent reinvestment of dividends and expansion into other growth areas, had created a portfolio worth just over $4.7 million. "You could retire to anywhere in the world with this," Martin told me during our last meeting, sliding the quarterly statement across his desk. "Multiple homes, first-class travel, whatever you want. You've been disciplined all these years, Eleanor. Don't you think it's time to enjoy the fruits of that discipline?" I studied the statement, still sometimes finding it hard to believe that my cautious, frugal Stanley had inadvertently made me, wealthy beyond anything we'd ever imagined. Possible. I thought about the guest bedroom that had been my home for 15 years, about the art classes I'd never taken, about Charlotte in Arizona, now suffering from arthritis and still asking when I might visit. "I'm thinking about it, Martin," I said, folding the statement and tucking it into my purse. "But the timing needs to be right." I nodded but said nothing more. I wasn't ready to leave the grandchildren I loved, even if their parents increasingly took my presence for granted. That would change sooner than I expected. The catalyst came on a drizzly Tuesday in March, the kind of raw New England day that seeps into your bones. I'd been feeling unusually tired lately, the accumulated exhaustion of 15 years of childcare finally catching up with my 73-year-old body. That morning, while preparing breakfast for Joey before school, a sudden wave of dizziness washed over me. The room tilted alarmingly, and I grabbed the kitchen counter to steady myself, accidentally knocking a glass to the floor where it shattered. "Grandma, are you okay?" Joey's concerned voice seemed to come from far away. I tried to reassure him, but the words came out slurred. The last thing I remember before collapsing was Joey's panicked face as he reached for the phone. I woke up. In the hospital, the rhythmic beep of monitors filling the sterile room. A doctor with kind eyes and a clipboard explained that I'd suffered a minor stroke. Minor seemed an inadequate description for the terror I'd felt as my body betrayed me. But I was fortunate. There appeared to be no permanent damage. "You need rest, Mrs. Winters," she emphasized, adjusting my IV. "And you need to reduce your stress levels. At your age, continuing with such an intensive caregiving role could lead to more serious health issues." Melissa sat in a chair beside my bed, her face drawn with worry. For once, she'd left work in the middle of the day, a rarity I couldn't recall happening since Joey had broken his arm 3 years earlier. "Mom, you scared us half to death," she said, squeezing my hand. "Why didn't you tell us you weren't feeling?" "Well?" I tried to smile. "I didn't want to worry you. You and Craig have enough on your plates. The doctor says you need complete rest for at least a month," Melissa continued, her brow furrowed. "No childcare responsibilities, no housework, just recovery." "A month?" I echoed, my mind immediately racing to the logistics. "But who will take care of Joey after school? And Emma has regionals for gymnastics and Ethan's science fair." "Mom, stop!" Melissa interrupted, her voice sharper than intended. She softened immediately. "We'll figure it out. Your health comes first." I was discharged the following day with a prescription for blood thinners and strict instructions to rest. Craig picked us up from the hospital, unusually solicitous as he helped me into the car. "Eleanor, we had no idea you were pushing yourself so hard," he said, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "You should have said something." I didn't respond. What was there to say? That I'd been pushing myself so hard for 15 years while they built their careers and their wealth? That every time I'd hinted at slowing down, they'd reminded me how indispensable I was to their family machine? Back at the brownstone, they'd moved a television into the guest room, my room, and Melissa had arranged a stack of novels on the nightstand. "Everything you need should be within reach," she said, plumping my pillows. "I've taken the rest of the week off to get things organized." I thanked her, genuinely touched by her concern. Perhaps this health scare would reset our relationship, help them see me as a person with needs rather than just a convenient childcare solution. That illusion lasted precisely 4 days. On Saturday morning, I overheard Melissa and Craig in the kitchen, their voices carrying up the stairs as they thought I was still asleep. "The agency wants $35 an hour for after-school care, plus overtime for evenings when we have events," Melissa was saying, her voice tense. "That's over $3,000 a month just for the basics, never mind if we need extra hours." "What about your mother?" Craig asked. "The doctor said a month of rest, not permanent retirement. She's lived here rent-free for 15 years. Surely she'll be back on her feet and able to help out soon." "I don't know," Melissa sighed. "The doctor emphasized she needs to reduce her responsibilities. Maybe we should look at assisted living options." My blood ran cold at those words. Assisted living? I'd had a minor stroke, not dementia. I was still sharp, still capable. I just needed some time to recover. "Those places are expensive," Craig countered, "and we'd still need childcare. Look, your mom's been healthy as a horse until now. Once she recovers, maybe we adjust her responsibilities, hire someone to help with driving the kids around, or get a cleaning service, but we still need her here. Do you know what full-time live-in childcare would cost us in this city?" There it was again, the calculation, the cost-benefit analysis of my presence in their lives. Not concern for my well-being, but concern for their bottom line. "We should talk to her," Melissa said finally. "See what she wants to do." "Of course," Craig agreed smoothly. "But make sure she understands our constraints. We can't afford to lose her help entirely, not with both our careers at critical junctures. Remind her how much the kids need her." I pulled the covers up to my chin, a chill settling over me that had nothing to do with the March weather. For 15 years, I'd deluded myself that I was an essential part of this family, loved and valued for who I was. Now I understood the truth. I was valued for what I provided: free childcare, a convenient household manager, an economic advantage. Later that day, they came to my room together, sitting carefully on the edge of my bed with practiced expressions of concern. "Mom, we've been talking about your health and what's best moving forward," Melissa began gently. "We're worried about you." "I'm already feeling much better," I assured them, forcing a smile. "The doctor says I'm recovering well." "That's great," Craig interjected, "but we need to think about the long term. You're not getting any younger, and this kind of health scare makes us realize we need a plan." "What kind of plan?" I asked, though I already knew. "We think you should continue living here with us," Melissa said, "but maybe with some adjustments to your responsibilities. We could hire someone to help with the more physical aspects of childcare, the driving, the shopping, some of the housework. But we'd still need you for the children," Craig added quickly. "They adore you, and nobody cares for them like you do." I looked at their earnest faces and realized they genuinely believed they were being generous. In their minds, allowing me to continue living in their guest room while reducing my workload was a kindness rather than the continuation of an arrangement that primarily benefited them. "I see," I said carefully. "And if I were considering other options? Perhaps getting my own place?" Their expressions shifted almost imperceptibly, alarm flickering across their features before settling back into concern. "On your pension?" Craigie said with a small laugh. "In this housing market, that wouldn't be realistic, Eleanor. Besides, the children would be devastated." "The stress of living alone wouldn't be good for your recovery," Melissa added. "Studies show that seniors who live with family have better health outcomes." I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak. They had it all figured out. The rational, logical case for why I should continue to serve their needs while sublimating my own. And on the surface, their arguments made sense. Boston was expensive. My teacher's pension, as far as they knew, was modest. Living alone at my age carried risks. But as I looked at them, my daughter and son-in-law, successful professionals in their late 40s, owners of $1 million brownstone and 2 luxury cars, employers of a weekly cleaning service and a landscaper, I felt something shift inside me. A lifetime of putting others first, of sacrificing my needs and desires for my family, crystallized into a single, clarifying moment of truth. They didn't see me, had never truly seen me, not as Eleanor Winters, woman with dreams and desires of her own, but as mom or grandma, or most accurately, the unpaid help. "I'd like some time to think about all this," I said finally. "The doctor recommended I avoid stress, and making big decisions right now would be stressful." They exchanged glances, clearly relieved that I hadn't outright rejected their plan. "Of course, Mom," Melissa said, patting my hand. "You rest and recover. We'll handle everything else." After they left, I reached for my phone and sent a text to Martin Goldstein, my financial advisor. "Need to meet. Important decisions to make. Can you come to me? Not at my current address?" His reply came within minutes. "Of course. Name the place and time." For the first time in 15 years, I began to plan for myself, and myself alone. 2 weeks into my recovery, I was feeling stronger. The dizziness had subsided, and I was able to move around the house without assistance. I still tired easily, but the doctor was pleased with my progress during my follow-up appointment. "Remember what we discussed, Mrs. Winters," she cautioned as I prepared to leave her office. "Your health needs to be your priority now. Stress and overexertion could trigger another episode, potentially more serious next time." I nodded, clutching the folder of information she'd provided about stroke recovery and prevention. "I understand, doctor. I'm making some changes." What I didn't tell her was that I'd already set those changes in motion. My meeting with Martin had been productive. We'd discussed options for housing, had reviewed my portfolio, and had begun the process of identifying the right place for me to live independently. He'd been enthusiastic about my decision. "It's about time, Eleanor," he'd said, eyes twinkling behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "Stanley would be thrilled to see you finally putting yourself first." I returned to the brownstone to find it unusually full for a weekday afternoon. Melissa's sleek Audi was in the driveway, as was Craig's BMW. As I hung up my coat in the entryway, I could hear their voices from the kitchen, along with another I didn't immediately recognize. "Mom, is that you?" Melissa called out. "Could you join us in the kitchen? We have someone we'd like you to meet." I made my way to the kitchen, where Melissa and Craig sat at the island with a woman I'd never seen before. She was perhaps in her early 30s with a neat ponytail and a tablet in front of her. "Mom, this is Danielle from Golden Years Transitions," Melissa said, her smile too bright. "She specializes in helping seniors find the right care solutions." I felt my smile freeze on my face. "Care solutions? Mrs. Winters, it's lovely to meet you," Danielle said warmly, extending her hand. "Your daughter has shared what a crucial part of their family you are, and how they want to ensure you have the best possible support after your health scare." I shook her hand automatically, my mind racing. They'd brought in an elder care consultant, without consulting me, while I was at my doctor's appointment? "We've been discussing some options," Craig explained, sliding a glossy brochure across the counter toward me. "Parkview Assisted Living has an excellent reputation. Independent apartments, but with staff available if needed, daily activities, transportation services, all the amenities." I glanced at the brochure without picking it up. "I see. It's really more like a resort," Melissa added quickly. "Beautiful grounds, a library, art classes. You'd love the art classes, Mom, and you'd have your own apartment, not just a bedroom like here." "The social aspect is wonderful for residents," Danielle chimed in. "Studies show that isolation is one of the biggest health risks for seniors. But at Parkview, there's always something to do, someone to talk to." I looked at the three of them, their expressions a combination of expectant and concerned. They'd clearly discussed this thoroughly before I'd arrived, had mapped out my future without any input from me whatsoever. "And how much does this resort cost?" I asked, though I already had a suspicion about where this conversation was heading. Craig cleared his throat. "It's an investment in your well-being, Eleanor. The base rate is $5,200 a month for a one-bedroom apartment, but there are additional costs for certain services." "I see," I said again, calculating quickly. That was more than 3 times my monthly pension. And who would be making this investment? A slight awkwardness descended on the room. Melissa and Craig exchanged glances. "Well, we've discussed it," Melissa began carefully. "And we think the best approach would be to use your pension, and we'd contribute the difference. It would be tight for us, especially with the children's activities and college funds to consider, but we believe it's the right solution." "We see it as a shared responsibility," Craig added smoothly. "Your pension covers part, we cover part, and in exchange, you'd have a safe, engaging place to live that meets your needs." "And what about the children?" I asked. "Who will take care of them while you're both working?" Another glance between them. "We've been researching nanny services," Melissa replied. "We found an agency that specializes in after-school care. It's expensive, but the children's well-being has to be our priority." I nodded slowly, taking in the magnitude of what was happening. In the space of 2 weeks, from the moment my health had become a liability rather than an asset to them, they had completely reorganized their vision of our family structure. I was being neatly extracted from daily life and tucked away in a facility where I would no longer inconvenience them with my human needs and frailties. "The children would visit on weekends," Craig continued, mistaking my silence for consideration rather than growing anger. "And of course, you'd join us for holidays and special occasions. You wouldn't be losing your relationship with them, just adjusting it to something more sustainable." Sustainable. as if I were a resource they had been overexploiting and now needed to manage more efficiently. Parkview has a waiting list, Danielle added, tapping her tablet. But your daughter mentioned you have a connection through Craig's workplace that might help expedite the process. We could potentially have you settled in within a month. A month. They'd already set a timeline for my removal. I'd like to think about this, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. It's a big decision. Of course, Mom, Melissa said, relief evident in her tone. Take your time. We just wanted to get the conversation started. Danielle has left all the information, and we can schedule a tour whenever you're ready. I excused myself, claiming fatigue from my doctor's appointment, and retreated to my room. Once inside, I leaned against the closed door, my heart hammering in my chest. The betrayal cut deeper than I had imagined possible. Not just the fact that they were essentially evicting me after 15 years of service, but the clinical, bureaucratic manner in which they were doing it, as if I were a problem to be solved rather than a person with dignity and agency. I sat, heavily on the edge of the bed, the brochure for Parkview Assisted Living still clutched in my hand. The cover featured smiling white-haired seniors playing cards in a sunlit common room. Live your golden years in comfort and community, the tagline promised. I flipped through it mechanically, noting the amenities listed in cheerful bullet points: weekly housekeeping, emergency call buttons, scheduled transportation to medical appointments, group activities designed to combat isolation and cognitive decline. It wasn't a terrible place. In fact, for many seniors with limited resources and no family support, it would be a godsend. But that wasn't my situation. I wasn't destitute or incapable. I had options they knew nothing about. And more importantly, I wasn't ready to be shelved away like a book that had served its purpose and now needed to be archived. My phone buzzed with a text from Martin. Found something you might like. Can meet tomorrow to discuss. Same place. 11 a.m.? I texted back my confirmation, then set about making a list of what I would need to do. The stroke had been a wake-up call, not just physically, but emotionally. It had revealed the true nature of my relationship with Melissa and Craig, had stripped away the comforting illusion that I was a valued family member rather than a convenient economic arrangement. That night at dinner, the atmosphere was artificially bright, with Melissa and Craig going out of their way to engage me in conversation about Parkview's amenities. The virtual tour on their website shows a beautiful crafts room, Melissa enthused, serving the lasagna I'd taught her to make years ago. You could finally take up painting, Mom. And they have transportation to museums and theaters, Craigie added. Much more stimulating than being stuck here watching the kids all day. The children, picking up on the strange tension, ate quietly, shooting confused glances between the adults. Why is Grandma going to a museum place? Joey finally asked. His 6-year-old brow furrowed. It's not just a museum, buddy, Craig explained. It's a special apartment building for older people like Grandma, where they can have friends their own age and do fun activities. But Grandma lives here, Joey protested, looking at me with worried eyes. With us? Before I could respond, Melissa jumped in. Grandma will still be part of our family, Joey. She'll just have her own special place instead of a bedroom here, and we'll visit her, and she'll visit us. But who will make my lunch for school? Joey persisted. Who will help me with my reading? We'll figure all that out, Craig assured him. Don't worry. I don't want Grandma to go, Emma declared firmly, her 12-year-old face set in a stubborn expression reminiscent of her mother's. She belongs here. This isn't up for discussion, Melissa said, her tone sharpening. Grandma needs special care now that she's been sick, and we've found a wonderful place where she'll get that care. I'm right here, I interjected quietly. Please don't talk about me as if I weren't in the room. Melissa had the grace to look embarrassed. Sorry, Mom. We're just trying to help the kids understand. Understand what, exactly? I asked. that the moment I became a little inconvenient, you started making plans to ship me off to an institution? Mom, Melissa gasped. That's not fair. Parkview is not an institution, it's a high-end senior community, and this isn't about convenience. It's about what's best for your health. If you were truly concerned about my health, I replied, keeping my voice even for the children's sake, you would have asked me what I wanted before making arrangements behind my back. Craig set down his fork, his expression hardening. Eleanor, we're trying to have a rational discussion about your future. There's no need to get emotional or make accusations. Emotional? I echoed. I've had a stroke, discovered my family considers me a burden, and found out you've been planning to remove me from my home, all in the space of 2 weeks. I think I'm entitled to a few emotions. This is exactly what we're worried about, Melissa said, casting a meaningful glance at Craig. The doctor said stress could trigger another episode. You're clearly not thinking clearly about what's best for you. And there it was. The subtle suggestion that I was no longer competent to make my own decisions, that my resistance was a symptom of decline rather than a legitimate reaction to being sidelined. Children, please go to your rooms for a little while, I said gently. The adults need to talk. But we're not finished eating, Ethan protested. You can come back and finish in a bit, I assured him. This won't take long. Once the children had reluctantly filed out, I turned to Melissa and Craig, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. For 15 years, I began, I have lived in your guest bedroom. I have raised your children, maintained your home, and enabled both of you to pursue your careers without the financial burden of childcare or the logistical complexities of managing a household with 3 active children. I have done this without complaint, without compensation, and without recognition. Mom, that's not fair, Melissa interrupted. We've always appreciated. I held up a hand, silencing her. Let me finish. During these 15 years, how many times did either of you ask me what I wanted? How many times did you consider that I might have dreams of my own, needs of my own, a life I'd put on hold to help you build yours? They exchanged uncomfortable glances but said nothing. The answer is never, I continued. Not once. You've treated my presence as a given, my labor as an entitlement. And now that I've had a health scare, your solution is not to adjust your lives to support me, but to remove me from the equation entirely, to outsource the problem I've become. That's not what we're doing, Craig protested, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. Isn't it? I asked. Be honest, at least with yourselves. This isn't about what's best for me. It's about what's most convenient and economical for you. How can you say that? Melissa's voice caught. We're offering to help pay for Parkview. That's hardly the economical choice. Compared to what? I challenged. Compared to hiring full-time help to replace all the unpaid work I've been doing? Compared to one of you scaling back your career? To be more present for your children? Of course, Parkview is the economical choice. For you. You're twisting everything, Craig said, his jaw tight. We've welcomed you into our home for 15 years. We've provided for you, included you in our family. And this is the thanks we get? I laughed then, a short, disbelieving sound. Provided. For me? Included me? Craig, I've been your unpaid employee, not your family member. The moment I could no longer perform my duties, you began making arrangements to replace me. That's unfair, and you know it, Melissa said, tears welling in her eyes. We love you. The children love you. We want what's best for everyone. What's best for me, I said firmly, is to be treated with dignity and respect, to have my wishes considered, not dismissed, to be seen as a whole person, not just a function. And what are your wishes? Craig asked, his tone suggesting he was humoring me rather than genuinely interested. I took a deep breath. I wish to live independently, not at Parkview or any other assisted living facility, but in my own home, making my own decisions. Melissa looked stricken. Mom, be reasonable. On your pension? In this housing market? Where would you even go? That's for me to figure out, I replied. I'm not asking for your help or your permission. This is the stroke talking, Craig said, dismissively. You're not thinking clearly. In a few weeks, once you've had time to process everything, you'll see we're right. Something in me hardened at his condescension. I've made my decision, I said, rising from the table. I'll be moving out by the end of the month. You have that long to make arrangements for the children's care. Mom, please, Melissa pleaded. Don't do anything rash. At least tour Parkview before you decide. I've given 15 years of my life to your family, I said, looking at each of them in turn. I don't owe you another minute of consideration. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go explain to my grandchildren that despite what you've told them, I'm not being sent away because I'm old and sick. I'm leaving because I've finally recognized my own worth. I walked out of the dining room, leaving them staring after me in stunned silence. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt a sense of lightness, of possibility. The betrayal stung, would continue to sting for a long time, I suspected, but it had also freed me from the obligation I'd felt to remain in a situation that no longer served me. The children were waiting anxiously in the twins' room, huddled together on Emma's bed. Are you really leaving, Grandma? Joey asked, his lower lip trembling. I sat down beside them, gathering Joey onto my lap. Yes, sweetheart, I am. But not because I don't love you or don't want to be with you. I'm leaving because it's time for me to have my own home again, just like you have your own rooms here. Is it because you're sick? Ethan asked, his sensitive nature always tuned to the undercurrents of adult conversations. No, it's not because I'm sick, I assured him. I'm getting better every day. It's because I've spent many years taking care of other people, and now it's time for me to take care of myself for a change. But who will take care of us? Emma asked, the practical one, always concerned with logistics. Your parents will figure that out, I said, choosing my words carefully. They might hire someone to help, or they might adjust their schedules, but that's for them to decide, not for you to worry about. Will we still see you? Joey's voice was small. Of course you will, I promised, hugging him close. I won't be far away, and you can visit me, and I'll visit you. I'll come to your soccer games and your gymnastics meets and your chess tournaments. I'll still be your grandma. I just won't be living in this house. They peppered me with more questions. Where would I live? Would I have a swimming pool? Could they have sleepovers? And I answered as honestly as I could without revealing too much. I hadn't finalized my plans yet, and I wasn't ready to share the details with them when their parents would inevitably interrogate them later. After reassuring them as best I could, I tucked Joey into bed and said goodnight to the twins. Then, I retreated to my room to continue planning my exit. I sent another text to Martin, asking him to bring specific paperwork to our meeting tomorrow. Then I began making a list of my personal belongings. It wasn't much, really. 15 years in. A single room meant I'd continually pared down my possessions. I had clothes, books, a few pieces of jewelry, photo albums, and some mementos from my teaching days. The furniture in the room belonged to Melissa and Craig. Even my car, an aging Honda Civic, had been gifted to me when they upgraded to newer vehicles, though the title remained in their names for insurance purposes. Another subtle way they'd maintained control. As I cataloged my meager possessions, I felt a renewed sense of determination. This next phase of my life would be different. I would reclaim not just my independence but my identity. Not as grandma or mom or unpaid household staff, but as Eleanor Winters, a woman with means, agency, and dreams of her own. The following morning, I left the house early, before Melissa and Craig were awake. I left a note saying I had a doctor's follow-up appointment, which wasn't entirely untrue. I did have a standing appointment with my physician later that week. But today, I was meeting Martin at a discreet cafe several neighborhoods away from the brownstone. He was waiting when I arrived, a portfolio on the table in front of him, and a gentle smile on his face. "Eleanor," he greeted me warmly, standing to pull out my chair. "You're looking well. How are you feeling?" "Better every day," I assured him, settling into the seat. "And even better now that I've made some decisions." "Good," he said, nodding approvingly. "I've brought everything you asked for, and I've found a property I think you'll love. The location is perfect, close enough to the children for regular visits, but far enough from your daughter and son-in-law to give you the independence you deserve." He slid a real estate listing across the table. It was a beautiful brownstone in Cambridge, smaller than Melissa and Craig's but still spacious, with 3 bedrooms, a sun-filled kitchen, and a small garden patio visible in one of the photos. "It's at the upper range of what we discussed," Martin said, "but given the market and the neighborhood, it's actually quite reasonable. The owner is motivated to sell quickly, relocating for work, and is willing to close in as little as 3 weeks if you can make a cash offer." I studied the listing, trying to imagine myself in those light-filled rooms, hosting the grandchildren for weekend visits, perhaps finally setting up that easel I'd dreamed of for so long. "It's perfect," I said finally. "Let's make an offer. Full. Asking price, contingent on inspection, of course." Martin raised an eyebrow. "You're sure? You don't want to negotiate?" "I'm sure," I replied firmly. "I want this settled quickly, before Melissa and Craig can find a way to interfere. They still think I'm reliant on my pension. Once they discover the truth about my finances, they may try to assert some claim or control." "They'd have no legal basis for that," Martin reminded me gently. "Stanley was very clear about his intentions, and the trust is ironclad." "Perhaps not legally," I agreed. "But they might try emotional manipulation, especially using the children. The sooner I'm established in my own home, the harder it will be for them to undermine my independence." Martin nodded, understanding. "I'll call the seller's agent right away. Now let's go through the rest of your financial plan. I've prepared several options for structuring your investments to provide a comfortable monthly income while preserving the principal." We spent the next hour reviewing documents, signing forms, and finalizing arrangements. By the time we parted, I had made an offer on a home, reorganized my investment portfolio for maximum income stability, and arranged for a moving company to pack and transport my belongings on the date of my choosing. I'd also set up a separate account with funds earmarked specifically for my grandchildren, not to be accessed until they were of college age, and not to be controlled by their parents. As I walked back to the subway station, I felt a curious mixture of emotions. Sadness at the rupture with my daughter, anger at the cavalier way she and Craig had dismissed my agency, anxiety about living alone after so many years in a bustling household. But underlying all of these was a growing sense of anticipation, even excitement. For the first time in 15 years, I was charting my own course, making decisions based on my own needs and desires rather than subordinating them to everyone else's. My phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. "Where are you? Craig and I want to continue our discussion from last night. We have some compromise ideas." I didn't respond immediately. Their compromise ideas would almost certainly involve keeping me in their orbit, but relieving themselves of any meaningful responsibility for my well-being. Perhaps they'd suggest I rent an apartment nearby instead of moving to Parkview, still close enough to help with the children, but no longer their direct problem if my health deteriorated further. No, I was done with half measures and false compromises. It was time for a clean break, a fresh start. I would tell them my decision when I returned to the house, but I wouldn't be swayed by tears or guilt or manipulation. Not anymore. As I descended into the subway station, I allowed myself a small, private smile. In just a few weeks, I'd be boarding a plane to Paris, first class, a luxury I'd never permitted myself before, for the art-focused European tour I'd dreamed of since my college days. I'd already reserved my spot, a splurge that would have been unthinkable before my meeting with Martin. And if fate aligned just right, perhaps I'd run into Melissa and Craig at the airport, their shocked faces a fitting farewell to the woman they thought they knew, the compliant, self-sacrificing mother and grandmother who would never put her own needs first. It was time they met the real Eleanor Winters, a woman of means and determination who was finally, after 73 years, learning to prioritize her own happiness. When I returned to the brownstone that afternoon, Melissa was waiting in the living room, her laptop open but clearly untouched. She'd taken another day off work, unprecedented in the normal course of events, a clear signal of how determined she was to resolve the Eleanor situation. "Mom," she said, rising as I entered. "Where have you been? We've been worried." "I had an appointment," I replied vaguely, hanging my coat in the entryway closet. "I left a note." "Yes, but you've been gone for hours, and you didn't answer my texts. After your stroke, we can't help but worry when we can't reach you." I almost smiled at the convenient concern. 2 weeks ago, I could have been gone all day running errands for the family, picking up dry cleaning, grocery shopping, ferrying children to activities, and neither Melissa nor Craig would have given a second thought to my whereabouts or well-being. "I'm perfectly fine," I assured her. "The doctor says I'm recovering well. Where are the children?" "Craig took them out for pizza and a movie. We thought it would be good for us to talk privately." "Of course they did." I nodded and followed her into the living room, settling into an armchair while she perched on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Mom, about last night," she began, her voice carefully modulated. "I think we got off on the wrong foot with the whole Parkview discussion. We should have included you from the beginning, and I apologize for that." "Thank you," I said simply. "No need to make this easier for her," she continued, warming to her prepared speech. "Craig and I have been talking, and we want to offer some alternatives. We understand that the idea of assisted living might feel premature, so we've come up with some other options that might work better for everyone." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing, waiting. "Option 1, she said, shifting into the same brisk, efficient tone she likely used in client meetings. "You continue living here, but we hire help, someone to assist with the more physical aspects of childcare and housekeeping. You'd still be here with the children, maintaining that bond, but without the strain that led to your stroke. In other words, I'd still provide the emotional labor and oversight, but they'd bring in muscle to handle the heavy lifting." I remained silent. "Option 2, she continued, faltering slightly at my lack of response. "We help you find a small apartment nearby, not Parkview, just a regular apartment. You'd have your independence, but you'd still be close enough to see the children regularly. We'd contribute to the rent, of course, since your pension might not cover Boston prices." Still the assumption that I was financially dependent on them, that any path to independence would require their subsidization. "And option 3, she finished, is a compromise on the Parkview front. Instead of moving in permanently, you could try it for a summer, like a trial period. See if you enjoy the amenities, the social aspects. If you don't, no harm done, and we go back to option 1 or 2. I let the silence stretch, watching her grow increasingly uncomfortable. "What do you think, Mom? These are just ideas." "We're open to anything that makes you comfortable while ensuring your health isn't compromised." "These aren't alternatives, Melissa," I said finally. "They're variations on the same theme, how to minimize my impact on your lives while maintaining access to my unpaid labor." Her cheeks flushed. "That's not fair. We're trying to find solutions that work for everyone, including you." "Including me?" I echoed. "You haven't once asked what I want. You've presented options that suit your needs and budget, not solutions that address my desire for genuine independence." "Mom, be realistic," she said, a note of frustration creeping into her voice. "Genuine independence costs money. We're offering to help because we care, Not because we're trying to control you. I studied my daughter, this woman I'd raised and loved, now a successful attorney who could argue passionately for a client's interests, but couldn't seem to recognize her own mother as a person with legitimate needs and desires of her own. Let me tell you what I want, I said quietly. I want to live in my own home, not as a guest in someone else's. I want to make my own decisions about my time, my activities, my future. I want to be treated as a capable adult, not a problem to be managed or a resource to be exploited. No one is exploiting you, Melissa protested. We're family. We help each other. Do we? I asked. For 15 years, the help has flowed in one direction, from me to you. When did you last make a sacrifice for my benefit? When did you or Craig ever put my needs above your convenience? She looked genuinely bewildered, as if the concept had never occurred to her. Mom, you chose to come here. You wanted to be part of the children's lives. We never forced you. That's true, I acknowledged. I did choose it, initially, and I've loved being part of the children's lives. But what was supposed to be a temporary arrangement became permanent without any real discussion. Year after year, my own life was put on hold while I enabled you and Craig to build yours. And we're grateful, she insisted. We've always been grateful. Gratitude isn't the same as respect, I replied. If you respected me, you would have asked what I wanted before bringing in an elder care consultant. You would have considered that I might have plans of my own, dreams of my own, rather than assuming I'd be content to serve your needs indefinitely. Melissa's expression hardened. Fine. What are your plans then? What dreams are we supposedly thwarting? I considered how much to reveal. The brownstone in Cambridge was not yet secured. The offer had been made, but not accepted. My financial situation was still my own private business, and frankly, I wasn't ready to show all my cards, not when Melissa and Craig might still attempt to interfere or undermine my independence. I plan to move out by the end of the month, I said calmly. I'll find my own place, live on my pension, and finally pursue the interests I've set aside for 15 years. Like what? She challenged, skepticism evident in her tone. Painting, for one, I replied. I was an art major before I switched to education. Did you know that? I wanted to be an artist, but I needed a more reliable income after your father left, so I became a teacher instead. I've always wanted to get back to it. Melissa blinked, clearly surprised by this revelation about her own mother. I didn't know that. There's a lot you don't know about me, I said softly. Because you've never asked. You've never seen me as anything but mom or grandma, roles, defined by what I could do for you, not who I am as a person. She had the grace to look uncomfortable. That's not true. I know you were a dedicated teacher. The kids from your classes still send you Christmas cards. Yes, some do, I agreed. And what else do you know about me? What are my favorite books? What music do I enjoy? What places have I always wanted to visit? What makes me laugh or cry or feel fulfilled? Melissa opened her mouth, then closed it again, realization dawning in her eyes. She didn't know the answers to any of these questions. In 15 years of living under the same roof, she had never bothered to learn who her mother really was beyond the functional role I played in her family. I'm sorry, she said finally. And for the first time, I believed she might actually mean it. I didn't realize. I've been so caught up in my own life, my career, the children. I know, I said, softening slightly. We all get caught up in our own concerns. But at some point, we need to step back and ask ourselves if we're living the right way, treating people the right way. My stroke was that moment for me. It clarified what matters and what doesn't. And we don't matter? The hurt in her voice was genuine. Of course you do, I assured her. You and the children matter enormously to me. But I matter too. For the first time in decades, I'm putting myself at the center of my own life. It's not a rejection of you. It's an embrace of me. Melissa was quiet for a long moment, processing. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, less certain. So, you're definitely leaving? There's nothing we can say to change your mind? I'm definitely leaving, I confirmed. But that doesn't mean I'm disappearing from your lives. I'll still see the children regularly. I'll still be your mother. I just won't be your live-in childcare provider anymore. And how will you manage financially? She pressed. Boston is expensive, Mom. Your pension won't go far, especially if you need to hire help for yourself after another health episode. There, it was again. The assumption of my financial dependence. The subtle suggestion that I couldn't survive without their support. Part of me wanted to reveal the truth right then, to watch her expression change as she realized her mother had been quietly wealthy all these years, but instinct held me back. The time for that revelation would come, but not yet. I'll manage, I said simply. I've always been careful with money, and my needs are modest. Melissa looked unconvinced, but seemed to recognize she wasn't going to get more information from me at this point. Will you at least let us help you find a place? She asked. Craig has contacts in real estate. He could get you a good deal. I thought of the brownstone in Cambridge, currently under consideration by its owners. That won't be necessary. I have it handled. Mom, please, Melissa said, frustration creeping back into her voice. Stop being so stubborn. We're trying to help. I appreciate the offer, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. But this is something I need to do for myself. She sighed heavily, clearly at a loss. So what now? You just leave? After 15 years just like that? Not just like that, I corrected gently. I'll give you time to arrange alternative childcare. I'll help the children adjust to the transition. I'll make sure Joey knows I'm not abandoning him, that Emma understands this isn't her fault, that Ethan has all my contact information for when he wants to talk. I'm changing my living situation, Melissa, not cutting ties with my family. She nodded slowly, defeat evident in the slump of her shoulders. Craig isn't going to take this well. Probably not, I agreed. He's accustomed to getting his way, to problems being resolved according to his preferences. But this isn't his decision to make. It's mine. And there's really nothing we can say to convince you to stay? She asked, one last attempt. No, I said firmly. My mind is made up. The only question is whether we handle this transition with grace and mutual respect, or with bitterness and recrimination. I'd prefer the former, for the children's sake if nothing else. Melissa was silent for a long moment, then nodded again, resignation in her eyes. All right, I don't like it, but I understand. We'll start looking for a nanny service tomorrow. Thank you, I said, genuinely grateful for this small acquiescence. She stood to leave, then paused, looking down at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Mom, are you happy? With this decision, I mean? The question caught me off guard. In 15 years, I couldn't recall Melissa ever asking about my happiness, my contentment, my emotional state. It had always been assumed that I was fine, that my needs were met by the mere fact of being included in their family life. I'm at peace with it, I answered honestly. And I believe I will be happy, yes. Happier than I've been in a very long time. A shadow passed over her face. Hurt, perhaps, or confusion at the implication that I hadn't been happy in their home. But she didn't argue. I hope so, she said softly. I really do. After she left, I sat in the quiet living room, tension slowly draining from my shoulders. The conversation had gone better than I'd anticipated. No shouting, no ultimatums, no threats. Just a reluctant acceptance that I was, in fact, going to forge my own path, regardless of their preferences or plans. Of course, Craig would be another matter entirely. As the primary breadwinner and self-appointed family decision-maker, he was unaccustomed to having his authority challenged. He would argue, rationalize, perhaps even attempt to intimidate. But I was beyond the reach of his influence now. The years of deferring to his judgment, of accommodating his schedule and priorities, were over. I spent the remainder of the afternoon in my room, making lists and quietly packing some of my most treasured possessions into a suitcase I would store at the back of my closet. Photos of Stanley and me in our younger days, the children's handmade cards and artwork, my mother's wedding ring. Small things, easily overlooked, but irreplaceable if lost in the coming upheaval. I also made a phone call to Charlotte, my sister in Arizona, with whom I'd maintained sporadic contact over the years. She answered on the third ring, her voice, warm and slightly raspy from the cigarettes she'd never quite managed to give up. "Ellie, what a lovely surprise. How are the grandkids?" "They're well," I replied, smiling at her immediate focus on the children. "Growing like weeds. Emma's nearly as tall as Melissa now." "Time flies," Charlotte mused. "They must be what, 10 and 6 now?" 12 and 6, I corrected. "The twins are 12, Joey is 6. Lord, has it been that long? I still remember when you called to tell me Melissa was pregnant with twins. You were so excited to be a grandmother, even though it meant putting your Arizona plans on hold." "About that," I said, seizing the opening, "I've made a decision, Charlotte. I'm moving out, getting my own place." There was a brief silence on the line, then a low chuckle. "Well, hallelujah. It's about time. What finally lit a fire under you? Did that son-in-law of yours say something particularly obnoxious?" I laughed despite myself. Charlotte had never warmed to Craig, finding him pompous and self-important during the few family gatherings they'd both attended over the years. "It's a long story," I sighed. "The short version is I had a minor stroke 2 weeks ago." "A stroke?" Charlotte interrupted, alarm evident in her voice. "Ellie, why didn't you call me? Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I assured her. "Recovering well. But it was a wake-up call. It made me realize I can't keep putting my life on hold indefinitely. And it revealed some unpleasant truths about my place in Melissa and Craig's household." "Let me guess," Charlotte said dryly. "The moment you couldn't fetch and carry for them, they started making noises about how challenging it is to care for an aging parent?" "Something like that," I admitted. "They had an elder care consultant waiting for me when I returned from a doctor's appointment. They'd already selected an assisted living facility, worked out payment plans, the whole 9 yards, all without consulting me once." Charlotte's outrage was audible even through the phone. "Those ungrateful little, after everything you've done, for them. 15 years of free childcare, and the minute you have a health issue, they're ready to ship you off to a home? I always said that daughter of yours inherited all of Richard's selfishness and none of your compassion." "She's not entirely to blame," I said, feeling a reflexive need to defend Melissa despite everything. "She's a product of her environment, her generation, and Craig's influence hasn't helped. He's very pragmatic when it comes to family obligations." "Pragmatic is a nice word for it," Charlotte snorted. "I'd have chosen something less polite. So what's your plan? Please tell me you're not coming back to Arizona. The housing market has gone insane here, and the politics are even worse." "No, not Arizona," I assured her. "I'm staying in Massachusetts, at least for now. I want to be near the grandchildren. But I'm looking at places in Cambridge rather than Boston proper." "Cambridge," Charlotte repeated thoughtfully. "Very nice area from what I've heard. But Ellie, can you afford it? Your teacher's pension can't go far in a market like that." Here was another opportunity to reveal my financial situation, but again, I hesitated. Charlotte was my sister, my only living blood relative besides Melissa and the grandchildren. We'd always been close, despite the geographical distance. But old habits of privacy die hard, and Stanley's admonition to keep the extent of our resources confidential had become ingrained over the years. "I've been saving," I said vaguely. "And I'll be fine," I don't need anything extravagant, just a place of my own, with room for the grandchildren to visit. If you say so, Charlotte replied, clearly unconvinced, but respecting my reticence. Just know that if you need help, all you have to do is ask. I don't have much, but what I have is yours. Her generosity touched me deeply. Charlotte had struggled financially most of her adult life, her career as a nurse interrupted by health issues of her own. Yet here she was, offering what little she had to support me if needed. The contrast with Melissa and Craig's attitude couldn't have been more stark. Thank you, I said warmly. I appreciate that more than you know, but truly, I'll be fine. Better than fine once I'm settled. We chatted a while longer, catching up on the minor events of our lives. Charlotte's arthritis was giving her more trouble lately, making her work at the senior center more challenging. Her son Michael had finally gotten engaged to his longtime girlfriend. Her cat Jasper had required emergency surgery after swallowing a hair tie but was recovering well. Normal, everyday concerns, shared between sisters. So different from the tense transactional conversations that had become the norm in the brownstone, where every interaction seemed laden with subtext and expectation. After we hung up, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Charlotte's instant support, her unquestioning acceptance of my decision to prioritize my own needs after so many years of self-sacrifice, reinforced my conviction that I was on the right path. The sound of the front door opening announced the return of Craig and the children. I heard Joey's excited voice, followed by Emma's more measured tones and Ethan's quiet contributions. Craig was saying something about ice cream, promising treats if rooms were cleaned promptly. I remained in my room, not yet ready to face Craig after my conversation with Melissa. She would tell him about my decision, and he would need time to process it before any productive discussion could occur. Knowing Craig, his first instinct would be to dismiss my declaration as emotional or irrational, a response to my health scare, rather than a considered choice. He would need to work through that initial reaction before he could engage with the reality of the situation. Sure enough, barely 15 minutes after their return, I heard Craig's heavy footsteps on the stairs, followed by a sharp knock on my door. "Eleanor, may I come in?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Yes, Craig." The door's open. He entered, still wearing his jacket, his face a careful mask of concern. "Melissa told me about your conversation. I think we need to discuss this further." "I disagree," I replied calmly. "I've made my decision. There's nothing further to discuss except the practical arrangements for my departure." His expression tightened. "Eleanor, be reasonable. You've had a health scare. This isn't the time to be making major life changes." "On the contrary," I countered, "a health scare is precisely the time to reevaluate one's priorities. Life is short, Craig." My stroke reminded me of that fact rather dramatically. He sighed, adopting the patient tone he likely used with difficult clients. "I understand you're feeling emotional right now. That's natural after what you've been through. But making hasty decisions based on temporary feelings isn't wise." "There's nothing hasty about this decision," I said. "I've been contemplating my future for some time." The stroke merely accelerated the timeline. "And how exactly do you plan to support yourself?" he asked, cutting to what he clearly viewed as the heart of the matter. "Boston is one of the most expensive housing markets in the country. Your pension won't cover rent in any safe neighborhood, let alone utilities, food, medical expenses." "My finances are my concern," I replied, maintaining my composure. "I managed my money successfully for decades before moving here, Craig. I'm quite capable of doing so again." He shook his head, frustration evident. "This isn't about capability, Eleanor. It's about mathematical reality. The numbers simply don't work. And after your stroke, you need to consider the possibility of ongoing medical needs, assistance with daily activities." "I had a minor stroke," I interrupted. "Not a complete physical and mental collapse. I'm recovering well, and my doctor expects me to regain full functionality. I don't need a caretaker or a financial guardian. I need respect for my autonomy and my decisions. Craig paced the small room, hands shoved into his pockets. This is about the Parkview suggestion, isn't it? You're punishing us for trying to find a solution that would give you proper care and support. No, Craig, I said firmly. This isn't about punishment. It's about recognition, recognizing that I am a person with my own needs and desires, not just a convenience in your household. He stopped pacing and faced me directly. That's unfair. We've welcomed you into our home for 15 years. We've included you in every family event, every holiday, every decision about the children. How can you say we've treated you as a convenience? I met his gaze steadily. When was the last time either of you asked what I wanted? What would make me happy? When have my preferences ever taken precedence over yours or Melissa's or even the children's? He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, genuinely stumped. Like Melissa earlier, he seemed to be searching his memory for instances that simply didn't exist. That's right, I said softly. You can't think of a single example because it hasn't happened. I've been accommodated when convenient and overlooked when not. I've been treated as a resource, not a person with equal standing in this family. That's not true, he protested, but the conviction had drained from his voice. We respect you. We value your contribution. My contribution, I echoed. That's telling, Craig. You value what I do, not who I am. There's a profound difference. He ran a hand through his hair, visibly frustrated. I don't know what you want. From us, Eleanor, we've offered alternatives to Parkview. We've suggested helping you find an apartment nearby. We're willing to contribute financially to ensure you're comfortable. What more can we do? You can accept my decision, I replied simply. You can respect that at 73. I am fully capable of determining my own path forward. You can support the transition in ways that minimize the impact on the children, who are the true innocents in this situation. Craig was quiet for a long moment, his businessman's mind clearly calculating odds, weighing options, seeking leverage. Finally, he sighed, a sound of capitulation rather than understanding. Fine, he said flatly. If you're determined to do this, we won't stand in your way. But don't expect us to bail you out when reality sets in. When you realize that independence, at your age, with your resources, is more challenging than you've anticipated. The condescension in his tone was unmistakable, but I let it pass. His inability to imagine me succeeding without their support would make the eventual revelation of my financial situation all the more satisfying. I won't need bailing out, I assured him, but thank you for your concern. He nodded curtly and turned to leave, pausing at the door. The children will be devastated. I hope you've considered the emotional impact your decision will have on them. It was a parting shot, a final attempt to leverage my love for my grandchildren into compliance with his wishes. But it failed to land as he'd intended. Children are remarkably resilient when changes are presented honestly and lovingly, I replied. And they'll adjust far better to a grandmother who visits regularly by choice than to one who remains in the household out of obligation and resentment. He left without another word, closing the door with slightly more force than necessary. I sank onto the edge of my bed, suddenly exhausted by the emotional toll of these confrontations. But beneath the fatigue was a current of quiet triumph. I had stood my ground, had maintained my resolve in the face of both Melissa's emotional appeals and Craig's logical objections. The die was cast. Within a month, I would be living in my own home for the first time in 15 years. I would be making my own decisions, setting my own schedule, pursuing my own interests. The thought was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. My phone buzzed with a text from Martin. Offer accepted. Sellers eager to close quickly. Can you meet tomorrow to review paperwork? I smiled, typing back a quick affirmative response. Things were moving faster than I'd anticipated, but I welcomed the acceleration. The sooner I established my new life, the less opportunity for Melissa and Craig to undermine my resolve or complicate my plans. That night at dinner, the atmosphere was strained. The children, sensitive to the undercurrents of adult tension, ate quietly, exchanging puzzled glances as Craig picked at his food and Melissa made overly bright, forced conversation. "So, Mom," she said with artificial cheer, "Craig and I have been discussing your decision, and while we're disappointed, we understand. We want you to know we'll support you however we can during this transition." I nodded, appreciating the olive branch despite knowing it was more for the children's benefit than mine. "Thank you. I appreciate that. We've already started researching childcare options," Craig added, his tone businesslike. "We've identified several agencies that specialize in after-school care and can accommodate the children's various activities. It's expensive, but necessary." The emphasis on expensive was clearly deliberate, a reminder of the financial burden my departure would create. I ignored the implicit criticism. "That sounds sensible," I replied. "The children's routines should be disrupted as little as possible." "Grandma, is it true you're moving out?" Emma asked suddenly. Her fork paused midway to her mouth. I looked at each of the children in turn, measuring my words carefully. "Yes, sweetheart. I'll be getting my own place soon, but I'll still see you often, and you can visit me whenever you like." "But why?" Joey's lower lip trembled. "Don't you like living with us anymore?" "Of course I do," I assured him, reaching across the table to squeeze his small hand. "I love being with you all, but Grandma is getting older, and it's time for me to have my own space again. Just like you have your own rooms here." "Is it because you were sick?" Ethan asked perceptively. "Are you afraid you'll get sick again and no one will be home to help?" His insight caught me off guard. "That's part of it," I admitted. "But mostly it's because I've spent many years taking care of other people, and now I'd like to have some time to do things I've always wanted to do, but never had the chance." "Like what?" Emma challenged, ever the skeptic. "Like painting," I replied. "I used to love to paint when I was younger, and traveling to museums to see famous artworks in person, and maybe taking cooking classes to learn cuisines from around the world." Joey's face brightened. "Will you make us special foods when we visit?" "Absolutely," I promised. "And maybe you can help me cook sometimes." The tension in the room eased slightly as the children began to process this change not as a loss, but as a new adventure, a different way of connecting with their grandmother. "Where will you live?" Ethan wanted to know. "Will it be far away?" "Not too far," I said, careful not to reveal specific details until everything was finalized. "Close enough that I can still come to your school events and sports games." "Will, you have a swimming pool?" Joey asked hopefully. "And a big TV for movies?" I laughed. "I don't know about a pool, but I'll make sure there's a comfortable place for us to watch movies together when you visit." As the children peppered me with more questions, I could see Melissa and Craig exchanging glances, clearly surprised by my ability to reframe the situation in a way that excited rather than frightened the children. Perhaps they had expected tears and tantrums, giving them another reason to classify my decision as harmful or selfish. Instead, the children were already imagining visits to Grandma's new home, speculating about what it might look like, what adventures we might have there. By the end of dinner, even Craig seemed resigned to the inevitable. My departure was happening, with or without their blessing. The only question that remained was how smoothly we would manage the transition, and how they would react when they discovered that the financially dependent mother they'd tried to relegate to assisted living was, in fact, a woman of considerable means about to embark on the adventure of a lifetime. The final 3 weeks in the brownstone were a masterclass in passive aggression. As my departure date approached, Melissa and Craig's behavior grew increasingly cold and dismissive. They spoke about me rather than to me, discussed my declining health within my hearing, and made pointed comments about the financial burden my decision was creating for their family. "The nanny agency wants $4,200 a month for the schedule we need," Craig announced loudly one evening while reviewing bills at the dining table. "That's nearly triple what we budgeted for childcare this year." Melissa nodded sympathetically. "Plus, the cost of a housekeeper now. Mom always handled all that." I said nothing, continuing to help Joey with his reading homework while they performed their little drama. The children, thankfully, remained largely shielded from the worst of the tension. I made sure to spend quality time with each of them, reassuring them that my love hadn't changed even if my address would. "Will your new house be ready by your birthday, Grandma?" Emma asked one afternoon as we baked cookies together, a weekly tradition I'd maintained since she was old enough to stand on a kitchen stool. "I think so, sweetheart," I replied, smiling at her flour-dusted face. "Why do you ask?" "Mom and Dad." "We're talking about your birthday trip. Dad said you wouldn't be able to afford it now that you're moving out." I paused in my cookie dough scooping. "My birthday trip?" Emma nodded. "To Paris, for your 75th birthday. It was supposed to be a surprise, but I heard them saying it would have to be canceled now." I felt a mix of amusement and indignation. There had never been any Paris trip planned, certainly not one I'd been informed about. This was clearly another attempt to make me feel as though my decision to leave was causing me to miss out on opportunities I would otherwise have enjoyed. "Well, that's very thoughtful of them to have considered," I said carefully, not wanting to call my granddaughters parents liars to her face. "But you know what? I have my own special plans for my birthday this year." "What kind of plans?" Emma asked, her interest piqued. "It's a surprise," I told her with a wink, "but I promise you'll hear all about it." The following day, Martin confirmed that the paperwork for my new home was complete. The previous owners had moved out early, and I could take possession whenever I wished. Additionally, the financial arrangements we'd made would provide me with a comfortable monthly income beyond what my pension alone could offer. "Everything's in place, Eleanor," he assured me over the phone. "The trust is established, the investments are structured for maximum stability and income, and your new home is ready and waiting. All that's left is for you to move in and start enjoying the fruits of your and Stanley's prudence." "And the other arrangements?" I asked. "For my birthday?" "All confirmed," Martin replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "First-class ticket to Paris, suite at the Hotel Raphael overlooking the Arc de Triomphe, and a private guide for the Louvre tour as requested. The travel agency will email your electronic tickets tomorrow." "Perfect," I said, a thrill of anticipation running through me. "Let's keep that between us for now. I have a feeling my departure is going to be more dramatic than anyone anticipated." The moving company arrived 3 days before my scheduled exit from the brownstone. I had informed Melissa and Craig of the date, but had been deliberately vague about the details. They assumed I was moving to a small apartment, perhaps in a modest senior living community that accepted payment on a sliding scale. When the uniformed movers from Boston's most prestigious relocation service arrived in a gleaming truck, both Melissa and Craig happened to be home, a rare occurrence on a weekday afternoon. They watched in barely concealed astonishment as the crew efficiently packed my admittedly meager belongings, treating each item with the care usually reserved for valuable antiques. "Premier Relocations?" Craig muttered, examining the logo on the movers' uniforms. "They're the most expensive service in the city. How are you affording this?" "I told you my finances were in order," I replied calmly, supervising as a young man carefully wrapped a framed photo of Stanley and me. "You needn't worry about it." His brow furrowed. "Are you dipping into savings? Because that's not sustainable, Eleanor. At your age, you need to preserve capital, not spend it on luxuries like overpriced moving companies." I merely smiled, which seemed to frustrate him even more. Melissa, meanwhile, was examining the paperwork the moving foreman had asked me to sign. "This says they're delivering to Cambridge," she noted, her tone accusatory. "You told us you hadn't finalized your living." arrangements yet. I said I would provide the details when they were finalized, I corrected. And now they are. Cambridge? Craig interjected. On your budget? What is it? Some kind of subsidized senior apartment complex? I signed the forms and handed them back to the foreman, ignoring Craig's probing. Will everything be delivered tomorrow morning as arranged? I asked. Yes, ma'am, the foreman confirmed. Our team will have everything set up by noon. The specialty items you ordered, the new bedroom set, the kitchen appliances, the living room furniture, were delivered yesterday as scheduled and are already in place. Craig's jaw literally dropped. New furniture? Specialty items? Eleanor, what is going on? Are you in some kind of debt situation we don't know about? Not at all, I assured him. Quite the opposite, in fact. Before he could press further, my phone rang. Martin, right on schedule with our prearranged call. Excuse me, I said, stepping. Horty and I need to take this. By the time I returned, the movers had finished loading the truck and were preparing to leave. Melissa and Craig stood in the foyer, twin expressions of confusion and suspicion on their faces. Mom, Melissa began, her tone a forced calm. I think we need to have a serious conversation about your financial situation. If you're spending money you don't have on expensive services and new furniture, we need to intervene before you create a real problem for yourself. There's no problem, Melissa, I replied, gathering my purse and jacket. But you're right about one thing. It is time for a serious conversation. Why don't you and Craig meet me for lunch tomorrow? I'll text you the address once I'm settled. Where are you going now? Craig demanded. The movers just left with your things. I'm staying at a hotel tonight, I explained. It seemed simpler than sleeping in an empty room. A hotel? Melissa echoed. Mom, that's completely unnecessary. You could have stayed here until your new place was ready. I preferred to make a clean break, I said, kissing each of the children goodbye as they watched wide-eyed from the staircase. I'll see you all tomorrow. As I walked out the door, I heard Craig mutter to Melissa, This is how people end up, bankrupt at her age. Magical thinking and impulse spending. I smiled to myself as the taxi pulled away from the curb. Tomorrow would certainly be educational for both of them. The following morning, I woke in my luxurious hotel suite feeling lighter than I had in years. After breakfast, I took a taxi to my new home, a beautiful 3-bedroom brownstone in Cambridge, on a quiet street lined with mature oak trees. The moving company had already arrived and was efficiently arranging my belongings according to the floor plan I'd provided. The home was exactly as I'd envisioned, spacious but not ostentatious, with large windows that flooded the rooms with natural light, hardwood floors that gleamed with a recent polishing, and a small but charming garden patio visible through French doors at the back of the house. The new furniture I'd selected complemented the classic architecture perfectly. I spent the morning directing the placement of my few personal items, then arranging the new purchases that had been delivered earlier, the comfortable sectional, sofa for the living room, the queen-sized bed for the master suite, the dining table that could expand to seat 8 when the grandchildren visited. By noon, the movers had departed, and I stood in the center of my new home, savoring the silence and the sense of ownership that had been denied me for so long. At precisely 1 o'clock, my doorbell rang. Melissa and Craig stood on the porch, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern as they took in the elegant facade of my new residence. Mom? Melissa's eyes widened as she surveyed the spacious entryway with its gleaming hardwood and tasteful artwork. What is this place? This is my new home, I replied, ushering them inside. Please come in. I'll give you the tour. They followed me through the house in stunned silence, their bewilderment growing with each room I showed them. The gourmet kitchen with its high-end appliances, the sunny living room with built-in bookshelves, the master suite with its luxurious bathroom, the 2 additional bedrooms, one set up as a guest room for the grandchildren, the other as the art studio I'd dreamed of for decades. This property must be worth at least $2 million in this market, Craig finally said, his businessman's mind automatically assessing value. The carrying costs alone, mortgage, taxes, utilities, maintenance, would be astronomical. There is no mortgage, I informed him calmly. I purchased it outright. Melissa sank onto the edge of the sofa, her face pale. Mom, this isn't funny. Where did you get this kind of money? Have you done something illegal? The suggestion was so absurd, I actually laughed. No, Melissa. I've simply been more financially secure than you've been led to believe. Led to believe? Craig's voice held an edge of anger now. What is that supposed to mean? You've been living in our home for 15 years, letting us assume you had nothing but your pension. I never said I had nothing, I corrected. You assumed. You never asked about my financial situation. You simply decided I was dependent on your charity and treated me accordingly. But where did all this come from? Melissa gestured around at the beautiful home. Dad was a teacher. You were a teacher. Teachers don't accumulate this kind of wealth. I indicated the dining table, already set for lunch. Why don't we sit down? I've ordered a meal from that Italian place you both like. It should be delivered shortly, and I'll explain everything. Over Capri's salad and fresh-baked focaccia, I told them about Stanley's stock options, the careful investments, the trust that had grown steadily over the decades while I lived modestly in their guest bedroom, cooking their meals and raising their children. I explained Martin's role as my financial advisor, the portfolio now worth nearly $5 million, the secure income it would generate for the rest of my life. All these years, Craig said slowly, setting down his fork. You could have been living like this, and instead you were with us. I chose to be with the grandchildren, I clarified. I loved being part of their daily lives, watching them grow. That was never a hardship. The hardship was being treated as a convenience rather than a person, having my needs and desires dismissed because you saw me only as a function, not as an individual with a life of my own. Melissa's eyes had filled with tears. Why didn't you tell us? About the money? About how you felt? Would it have made a difference? I asked gently. Would knowing I had money have made you respect my autonomy more? Or would it simply have changed the nature of your expectations, from free childcare to financial support? She had no answer for that, which was answer enough. There's one more thing you should know, I added, retrieving an envelope from the sideboard. I'm taking a trip. A rather significant one. I handed them the envelope, which contained the printed details of my travel arrangements. Craig opened it, his eyes widening as he scanned the documents. First class to Paris? He read incredulously. For a month? Departing next week? For my 75th birthday, I confirmed. I've always wanted to see the Louvre, the Musée d'Orsay, Monet's garden at Giverny. Now I finally can. But the children, Melissa protested weakly. They'll miss you. I've arranged for them to join me for a week during their spring break, I informed her. All 3 of them, if you'll permit it. The suite I've booked has plenty of room, and I've already researched child-friendly activities in Paris. Craig stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. You've really thought of everything, haven't you? I've had 15 years to plan, I replied simply. 15 years of putting everyone else first. Now it's my turn. As they left an hour later, visibly shaken by all they had learned, I felt not triumph, but a quiet sense of vindication. In 1 week, I would board that first-class flight to Paris, beginning the adventure I'd deferred for so long. And perhaps, if fate aligned, Melissa and Craig would be at the airport that day, witnessing my departure, the final confirmation that the woman they had underestimated for so many years had finally reclaimed her life, her dignity, and her future. The free babysitter was gone. In her place stood Eleanor Winters, traveler, artist, woman of means and independence, And she had places to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.